So I am honoured to have with me the head of City of Games and designer of Isle of Cats and City of Kings and Vodoran Gardens, in fact, Frank West. Frank, thank you for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be on here and getting a chance to chat about some stuff.
So my first question, and I say this to everyone, this is where you turn the modesty volume knob down to 0. Here I want you to brag and be as well, not arrogant, just honest as you can. So my first question is, when did you realise you were good at what you do?
It's a really interesting question. As you say, you have to kind of think past that, like the modesty side of things a little bit. And I suppose for me, I find that particularly hard to challenge it, like to answer, because I don't know if I got good at designing games before I designed games. And what I mean by that is, in a past life, I used to work in user experience, which is all about crafting experiences for people using software or using, if you go into a shop, crafting that experience of you walking around that shop and buying the things that you wanted. And I suppose that by doing that for so many years, I spent a lot of time thinking about the experience that a user is going to have. How do you optimize that? From how do they learn something? How do they interact with something? What are the touch points which are important? And I was very good at that job. I was very, very good at kind of creating these experiences. And I think for me, when I kind of came into game design as a profession, those elements I was already comfortable with. So of course you've still got to have the concept for the game, but as an overall design of how do you create an experience that people are going to have fun with, it was just a different way of approaching something that I consider myself good at for quite a long period of time.
Yeah, it's interesting because your story is incredibly interesting because I remember we had an interview. It must have been like 4 years ago now when City of Kings was around. And I remember asking you a question, and I didn't mean it facetiously, and I don't think you came across as... But you were this guy who was new in the industry, and you had this massive game that was coming out. And I asked you sort of, this is a big game, it's an expensive game, why should people spend their money on the game that you've designed? And you gave a great answer. And it seems to me that you, as a designer, you came out sort of fully formed with City of Kings. Was that surprising that, that was your first game and you were able to sort of put together something that was so consummate, so professional and worked so well?
I suppose yes and no. If you are a football player and you suddenly switch from football to basketball, I'm sure that they're incredibly different things, right? You have to understand the game differently, but you still have that inbred kind of like fitness regimen. You understand playing with a team, how to work with other people, how to get your body in shape, what you should eat. You understand competition and playing in those situations. And I guess for me, it was kind of like that. I understood what it took to go from an idea on a piece of paper to a finished product that people would see as a fluid experience to be able to kind of get through. And what I wasn't familiar with was, a game as such. But games, if you go to Amazon, you buy a pair of socks, is what I always kind of say to you. That's an experience. No one is teaching you how to buy socks, right? You go to the website, you work it out, and there's a lot of overlap in that kind of game design systems of those two things. So I guess that I was not surprised that I could create a game and kind of get, the design, the artwork, the actual final finished product to that level. But I guess I was more surprised that I could get it in front of people and make people aware that that game existed. For me, that was certainly the hardest part of that process.
So, it's sort of conceivable, I guess, that there are sort of savants with game design, people who just... And this couldn't be further away from my brain, people who just understand how mechanisms click together and how they generate fun, right? Whereas with you, it is not just game design. It's not like you're a game design savant. You're someone who manages to pull everything together and from City of Kings was able to pull something together that looked, top drawer, really sort of high end from the beginning. Did you have a project management background before you came to publish games?
Um, So not project management. I worked in lots of different fields. So originally I started off as a programmer, and programmers get you very used to kind of logic and creating, functional kind of bits, splitting something into tasks and understanding when it's more efficient to keep those things as one unit and when it's more efficient to separate them into different things. I then, as I said, moved into kind of user experience, understanding the experience from a user side, and that, as much as it's about crafting that experience, it's also about understanding what a person wants. You create personas of the people who are going to be using this thing, and you think about what those people want. And if you think of a game, the persona of people playing the games, yes, you have people who want the perfectly balanced, tightest connecting feels and mechanics, but you also have the people who just want to have fun. You've got the people who, they don't even really care if it's fully balanced because they'll never know. They just want to have a good time playing something. You've got people who care more about the artwork and the components. You've got people who care about the story and the narrative. And there are different personas to kind of think about. And I suppose then I was also in business analysis. So I used to go into companies and I had to overview their entire process as a company. So understand every department within that company and how those departments use things and connect them. So whilst none of this was project management, they were all understanding the flow of information between different things, understanding how to separate tasks, how to kind of bring it together, and obviously focusing on what that kind of end person wanted.
So you worked before City of Games. You worked in a video game company that didn't work out, and I assume that with your board game designs, you never went through the pitch to companies, hope to get published route, and went straight into self-publication. Is this because of this experience with the video game company that you wanted sort of overall control over everything that you were doing?
I think there's a couple of elements to it. I do enjoy the publishing side of things as much as I enjoy the design side of things. I'm also a firm believer of kind of enjoying my life. I want to enjoy what I do. And one of the things I found is if you have a job, let's go away from game design for a minute, but let's just say, again, I'm working as a programmer and my job is to program applications. And that's it. I go to work and I get told, here's a new thing we're going to program. I program it. I enjoy doing that. Over the next few months, I create that thing. And then I go in the next day and they say, hey, there's something new that you need to program. And you start again. And you're looping through that same process. And for me, by doing publishing, by doing all of the other sides of this stuff, it means that not only am I doing game design, but I'm doing manufacturing, I'm doing marketing, I'm doing sales, I'm doing logistics, I'm talking to distributors, I'm going to conventions. And what that means is I can spend 3 months designing a game, and then I'll spend 3 months not designing a game, thinking about games, but working on totally different stuff. So when I next come back to designing a game, it feels fresh again. It feels exciting again because I'm sat there thinking, oh my goodness, I'm in these spreadsheets. I'm thinking about how to get my games to 80 different countries. I don't want to be doing this today, but tomorrow I get to design again. And it kind of switches it from a repetitive requirement to giving you things that you kind of look forward to. And, sometimes you get to that point where you're kind of getting to the end of a design and you're just like, I wish I could be back in my logistics spreadsheets, because I can't solve this. And so for me, the self-publishing was a way to kind of keep things as fresh as possible and to understand the process. Because, again, if you're designing a game, the mechanisms in your game, the experience of playing that game, that's just one part of it. That's not the whole experience. Again, if you're a football player, right, kicking a ball isn't a football player. There's so much other stuff around that. And I think, to me, understanding manufacturing requirements, understanding shipping requirements, how to get things to people, being more in touch with the end gamers who are playing those games, that allows you to create something better because you can pull back from that. And next time around, you say, actually, this is what people were doing. This is what people kind of wanted. This is the bits they liked and they didn't like. And now I can do something better next time.
And are there any aspects in the wide palette of stuff you do? Are there any aspects at which you think you particularly excel, and any other aspects that you think you struggle to be good at?
Um, that's a really tricky question to answer. I think that again, I hate to kind of be someone who kind of says like I'm good at things, and I think that when it comes to excelling, I think that I'm good at timelines, and I'm very much a this is what is going to happen, and I will find a way to make that happen. And I think that sometimes when people work with me, they it takes a little bit of getting used to me because I will do my deadlines and I will be very firm and say, look, this is what needs to be done by this date, and you've got plenty of time. Like, you're not going to be told tomorrow, right? You're going to be told this is what needs to be done. And it becomes very black and white. If you don't have it done by that date, then we go somewhere else, right? And that's it. We've parted ways. But if you do get it done by that thing, you will be rewarded in every possible way that I can reward you. And I'm very much like that. I guess a good example of that is the first meeting I ever had with my manufacturers in person was at Gen Con. And this was after we had made the City of Kings, so I hadn't met them in person before. And we sat down and I said to them, right, we've made this game now. So what are our learnings from your perspective? Like, what did you find hard working with me? And they said, you were the first person we ever worked with who actually got the game to us on the date you said you were going to get to the game to us. And normally we get it 2, 3, 4 weeks late. So we planned to get it late and we hadn't planned to actually get it on time. So I think I'm very good at that time side. The thing that I struggle with, which I'm sure everyone else would say that I do a good job at, is the sales and marketing side, because I'm a firm believer in organic sales. I hate the idea of saying to you, buy this thing. I love the idea of you coming to me and saying, I've learned about this thing. Should I buy it? Like, why would I like it? Why wouldn't I like it? And having that conversation. But I hate adverts. I hate anything which is forcing you to look at something. I love the idea of, hey, I played this cool game. Do you want to try it out? And then enjoying it and telling someone else. And obviously, this is a business after all, right? And you can't just rely on that side of things. So I think that I feel like I struggle with that side because I am not comfortable. This is a passion for me, right? I don't want to force you to buy something. I want you to buy my game if you believe you're going to enjoy it. I don't want you to buy it and hate it and just chuck it on a shelf or get rid of it, because then you've wasted your money, right? And I feel bad about that. So I guess that's probably my weakest part of these things.
So I remember I was at UK Games Expo, and this is probably a year before Isle of Cats came out. And you said, hey, I've got this thing to show you if you want. And, I don't think you would have taken me back into the office and shown me if I had not had microphones with me. But, and then we had a chat about it. And you were sort of very enthusiastic. This is this new game. I think it's going to be super successful. It's pitched at this market, and I think it's really going to fit in. And all of that is borne out. And so do you think that you could have existed in the way that you do pre-internet, when you would have to do conventional advertising, when you have to go through, magazine advertising channels, TV advertising channels, that sort of thing?
Not at all. And it's really interesting. And I'll see if I can find a short way to answer this question without giving you like a 4-hour story of my life. But my father was an ideas person. Like, my father died nearly 20 years ago now, but he, for my life and all the time he was with my mum, never had a job. He never worked for anyone else. He always made stuff and sold things. And he created a whole number of different products that were amazing and incredible. And even to this day, not to rant too much on a side thing, but there was one thing that he created that I feel like would be worth fortunes today. But when he died, we lost how to make it. And obviously, and I still hope to God that one day I find like a piece of paper in my mum's house that says, but the point is that he was incredible at the same kind of things that I am in the way that he is. And he had old school camcorder. So we've got hundreds of VHS tapes, those original big box tapes that he had in this big camera that he used to record videos of himself, just like I do with my board games, teaching these things, talking about these things. But there was no way to ever get those in front of people back then, right? And he would have been so successful now. But he did everything we do now. He created podcasts, videos, all of this content 30 years ago before this content had that platform. And so I can only assume, based on that if I was back then, I would have had the same troubles that he had with those kind of things.
So, can you give us an overview, sort of from getting the idea in the shower to me getting the game and being terrible at it? What is your game design process?
For me, I start off a lot in my head. And I'm someone who is, I think if I had a superpower, my superpower would be the ability to think through the flow of a process in my head, and to see, and not to get to an outcome, but to see all of the pathing options from that. So when I first come up with an idea, it's a real battle. And Sarah, my girlfriend, she always kind of like knows when I'm having this idea, because I'll just be sat on the sofa and I'll just be like, kind of really happy for a minute, and then she'll see that, oh, he's obviously hit a bit that doesn't work, and I'll be thinking it through. And sometimes I'll sit there for days just thinking through these things, and then I'll make a prototype. And it's once I kind of feel like I know the solution to a lot of those core problems, and I know that kind of core process is when I start prototyping. But these days, when I do prototype, I want to be playtesting within a day. Like what I put onto paper is something that I already see as a strong concept. And that doesn't have to be a whole game. It might just be a combat system, right? It might just be an exploration system. It might just be the placing tiles on a board and not how you get those tiles. But once I've got to that point, I just start playtesting straight away, because I've learned over the years that it's so easy not to play test until you've invested so much time. And it's not until you get to other people that you kind of really start to see how these things come out. Because something can be great in your head. It can be amazing in your head. You can play it and have a wonderful time, but no one else is going to enjoy that. And of course, as you get more into it, you start to understand these things a little bit more anyway. But that playtesting is really heavy. So I have a small group of people, and it's 15 or 20 people who are local, who I play board games with. And often those will be the people who I'll do all of this prototyping with. And it won't be until I get more to I'm happy with the game as a game, that I then start opening it up to like that wider audience, because that group of people is enough for me to test the different parameters. And those, okay, of course, these days, those people are my friends, but they meet a wide requirement, from the super heavy Euro gamer who just wants that complex brain scratching kind of thing, to the guy who says, every game ever designed is rubbish and no games are good, but yet still plays 5 board games a week and hates them all and will find every criticism he can in everything, to just like 2 of my like really good friends who are just really casual board gamers, don't really play many games, but they enjoy them when they do. And by testing with all of those different points, it really quickly allows me to understand what's happening. And it's at that point I really start to focus on, who's this game for? Because you can make a game without thinking about that. But as I also do the publishing side and I want that game to work, who is it for? I could very easily sit down tomorrow and make a game, and it could be the best game ever for 500 people. Or equally, I could make a game and it could be the best game ever for 20,000 people. But and both of those games would be equally successful if that was my goal with designing that game.
Right.
But if you don't think about that, you could see it as a failure, and that's, I think, a big part of that process. And then, of course, over that time, blind play testing and kind of just iterating through those kind of final steps. But being like the most important step of this whole thing is I'm incredibly passionate about what I do, right? I love what I do, and my games are a part of me. But equally, being able to let other people tell you when something's bad and listening, to not say this has to be there because this is what I wanted, that's like such a key part of that process of. And I think because I come from that user experience thing where I used to do, user testing and having people talk at processes, not taking it personally and just going, why did Ben say this was the worst thing he's ever done in his life? And I love it. And sometimes it might simply be because you're left-handed, all of the icons are on the left side of the card, and you've just not been able to play it. And it's been so frustrating that it's distracted you. Or sometimes it might be because it's bad.
So I had a friend who wanted to be a designer, and I knew he was not going to succeed at design because the first time I play tested one of his games and I started to give him criticism, he leapt down my throat, right? Mm-hmm. And all he did was defend why it was right and why I'd misinterpreted what was happening. And, if any creative process is about criticism, but how do you deal with it, just as a person, when someone says, "I'm sorry, mate, this is just crap"? I mean, how do you deal with it?
I think the key part to this is why. So again, if I've designed a game for a group of people, let's say that I've created a sci-fi simulation of the evolution of an alien species, and it's super mass heavy, super complex, and I think there's about 500 people out there who enjoy it. If those 500 people love it and everyone else says it's total trash, then it doesn't matter that they say it's trash because that wasn't what I was trying to do. And of course, you still shouldn't ignore them. You can still understand why, so that you can see if there's ways you could have tweaked or adjusted it to make them enjoy it more. But if those core 500 people are turning around and saying it's bad or not enjoying it, then that's stuff that you really need to take on board. There's different types of people. There's the trolls who are just going to say everything's bad, and you can just kind of look at that and go, look, you're just unhappy, right? You got it from Amazon, it turned up damaged, you're blaming me, you're just having a bad time. And I'm still going to read what you say in case there's something insightful in there, but odds are it's just going to be someone having a bad day. You've got the people who the game isn't really for, and in that case, as I say, you want to learn if you can do something for them, but it's not the end of the world. And then you've got the people it is for. And really, to me, taking criticism, as I say, is understanding why they're saying it. Whether it's because it's a problem, whether it's because they're just the wrong person, or whether it's something in between. And you should always review it. I, generally speaking, I keep tabs of stuff. If you turn around and say, hey, I played Are the Cats the other day, and I think that the blue cats are worse than all the other cats. And in my head, I'm kind of like, well, there's the same of each, right? So I don't really see how it's possible. But I'll keep a tab of the fact you said it. And if, 6 months later, I've suddenly got 25 people have said the blue is worse and no one's mentioned any of the others, then I'm going to start to really think, well, what's causing this? And is it a perception? Is it because the blue cats are smaller, so when people look at their boats, they don't see as many cats as they would see with the other cats, so they feel like they've got less? Is it because there's a card in there I haven't considered that makes that change? But I think really, with all criticism, it's why. And sometimes, just everything in life, people say hurtful stuff just because they're jealous or say they've had a bad day. And with those, you kind of have to bite your tongue. Those are the people where you kind of, you go to your girlfriend or your best friend and you're just like, oh my goodness, there's this guy called Ben and he's just bought this and this has happened. And then you go back and write Ben an email and say, sorry to hear about that, Ben. I'll take this on board and see if we can improve it and just move on with your life, because you get a lot. I spend an hour and a half every morning responding to emails and, that's my life. It doesn't matter. 7 days a week. If I'm on holiday, if I'm at home, if I don't do it, it builds up. And you just have to know when to listen and when to look past.
So, you've designed Isle of Cats, which has been fabulously successful. You've joined the Million Club with the expansion of Isle of Cats, which is mind-blowing. Yeah. And people really enjoyed it. I played it. I reviewed it. I thought it was great. And I'm not just blowing smoke where smoke shouldn't go. I think it's a genuinely good game. So what for you is the crux of a good design, would you say?
So this is a really interesting question, and I think that game design and what is a good game design is a much harder question to answer today than perhaps 5, 10 years ago, probably more closer to 10. And what I would say is this: if you let's take the Olympics. The Olympics happened recently. Hopefully, most people are familiar with the Olympics. You know, hundreds plus countries competing at different sports. To be an Olympian, a competitor, a sporting athlete, you can be a 100-meter sprinter. You could be a swimmer, a high jumper. You could be a skateboarder these days. You can be anything you like. So many different events, and we would never consider comparing them.
Right.
But they're all athletes, they're all sports professionals. And I think game design has become like that. So if I said to you, hey, look, I've made Exploding Kittens or Cards Against Humanity, I've made Gloomhaven or, Too Many Bones, or I've made Twilight Imperium, or I've made Azul or Ultimate Werewolf, these games are not comparable with each other. What makes them good is different. For again, a heavy Euro game, you want this big thinking, mathematically balanced game. But for something like, and for Gloomhaven, you want a story, you want this narrative, you want a sense. If you play Azul, you don't want that. You want something different. Exploding Kittens, Cards Against Humanity. You could, with those games, you could argue you don't even really need a game behind them. It's the concept of an experience. It's great. Right. So when it comes to what is a good game design, it's kind of like, it depends on the kind of game that you're making. You could easily say, is it, perfectly balanced? Is it fun? Is it thematic? Is it this or that? But I think that I would summarize it as, does it provide the experience that you want that game to provide? Right. Because beyond that, it's like comparing, apples to oranges in the one game design doesn't cover all types of games by any means, at least in my opinion these days.
So you come out of the blocks with City of Kings, big, heavy adventure co-op game. Then you design Fedora Gardens, a little, tactical card game, and then you do Isle of Cats, which is probably what you're most well known for, which is, for me, and you can correct me if you find this offensive, slap bang in the sort of family weight area, right? It's a game that can be enjoyed by everyone. And I think a lot of people are thinking with you, they're thinking back to City of Kings and thinking, is he ever going to do that again? Has the success of Isle of Cats sent him down a road where he's going to, explore the more sort of commercial family sort of arena? So I guess it's a way of asking, what are you doing at the moment? And are you going to go back to these big, heavy adventure games?
Yeah, so it's interesting. One of the things I want people who enjoy me and my games, as you've mentioned, kind of Fedora Gardens, Isle of Cats, City of Kings, is to not know what's coming next. All three of those games were so different to each other. One of the things I think that's really strong about me and how I create games is I don't sit in a box. I think all of my games are very puzzly games. I would say if you're trying to find what connects my games, it's that puzzly heart that kind of sits in them. But outside of that, they are different and they attract different people and they aim for kind of different audiences. And this is because I want to design games that I enjoy and I want to be doing things that are different. I want to kind of not say, hey, if I want to make money, this is what I should do. If I want to make money, then I'm going to make the Isle of Dogs and find some way to be able to use that name and go down that path, right? But that's not me. I'm never going to re-theme or skin that game and go down that path because I've got no interest in that. I want to challenge myself. And at the moment, I'm working on another smaller game, and I kind of basically alternate between a big game and a small game, which is a fully cooperative game. So that does take a bit from that kind of City of Kings kind of cooperative side. But it's not necessarily... It's an interesting one because it scales from very, very simple to a very, very hard game. If you enjoyed the hardest challenges in the City of Kings, you'd enjoy the hardest challenges in this. Whereas if you enjoy the family mode of the Isle of Cats, you'll enjoy the more family mode in this. And for me, this game is an exploration of, can you appeal to both of those two kind of sides of that coin? But in regards to like another big game like the City of Kings, it's definitely going to happen. I was working on one which I was really, really happy with, and it's, for simplicity terms, a big sci-fi dungeon crawl game, right? And I spent a good kind of year on it and kind of working on artwork and stuff. And then COVID hit. And for me, those kind of games are in-person experiences.
Right.
To make that game as optimal as it can be, you've got to be with people. And I've not been playtesting in person with groups of people for 18 months.
Right.
So that game's just sat on the side. So that game, in the normal timeline of life, would have probably been finished by now. But instead, it's kind of just sat to one side for a year and a half. And, now the world's kind of returning to normal. I'm working on a couple of other games that I've been working on through lockdown. So who knows when I get back to that? But it's certainly something that I can see happening. And I've worked on several different big games. And I guess one of the challenges that I have is I don't want to just make the City of Kings 2. I want to make something that's as different from the City of Kings as the Isle of Cats is, but still in that kind of world of kind of big, heavy, complex kind of games. And that does mean that when you've got a game that large, there's a lot more testing and playing and kind of iterating than the smaller games have.
So I've got two more questions for you. So conventions are back on, and you've gone there and you've worked, and you go out for dinner in the evening, and you're coming back from the loo, and you hear a table of gamers in the restaurant, and you hear your name mentioned. So you sidle into a corner and you eavesdrop on them. What do you hope they're saying about you?
I think the simplest answer would be, I wonder what he's doing next. Like, I'm excited about what he's doing next, because I kind of like to have this, like I said, this more mystical thing about, like, we don't know what his next game is going to be, right? It's probably not going to be a polyomino game, because he's just done a polyomino game. It's probably not going to be a little card tile placement game, because he did that before. So what's coming next? But really, I think that's always my goal. But I guess fundamentally, I want people who are looking at these games that I've made to kind of feel like I've made them with care. I want them to be saying, it feels like the person who made this understands gamers, understands what we want. And it's not just this mechanic in a box. It's a crafted experience, from the components, the pieces, the artwork, the ease of learning, the experience of playing the game, and to feel like it's kind of that complete package.
So, last question then. Yes. You can choose to answer this in whichever way you want. Why is gaming good?
It's a really... I do like this question, because I feel it's really easy to answer by saying, because it provides an enjoyable experience, but I think that feels so empty as an answer in the same way, because there's a lot of things in life that provide enjoyable experiences, and life should be about having a good time. There are serious moments, but when you get to that last breath, you want to kind of look back and feel like you've enjoyed your life. But when you have that last breath, do you think back and say, is my life, was it good? Was it bad? And depending on how short that breath is, maybe. But, if you're lying in a hospital bed and, you've got that last hour, you're going to think back. And you're going to think back to memories. You're going to think back to when my kids were born. You're going to think back to, when I got married, when I finally got the dream job I wanted or bought that house. And I think that gaming offers the opportunity to provide an experience that you will always remember. And maybe that one experience, out of hundreds of games you play, it may ever happen once, but it can inject a moment into your life that you will never forget. Whether it's comical, whether it's, you see people who propose through games, right, where
Mm.
they change a card in the game. I had someone speak to me who said that they had one of my games when they were giving birth and they were in the hospital and they were literally playing it in the room whilst they were waiting to kind of, push the baby out. And you kind of think that's something that's always going to be there, right? It's providing not just enjoyment, but potentially a moment. And I always think back to my childhood, and I was a video gamer. I played many video games, right? But there was a time in my life where me, my brother, my mum, and my dad would sit at a table and we would play card games. Things like
Mm.
poker and kind of traditional card games because that's what we knew. But 25 years later, I still remember sitting at that table
Mm.
with them. And when you say to me, what's a moment of you and your family enjoying being together, that comes up on that list.
Right.
And gaming provides that. It provides those moments that are just as important in life as any other moments can be.
Brilliant. Well, Frank West, thank you very much for giving over your time.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for letting me come on. It's always a pleasure to chat and to kind of get to talk about some of these things.